Hey, Dolls and Beauties. I wanted to do a little story time just in terms of my past. I've always wanted to do this topic, but never really got the chance to. So I just thought today, hey, why not? The topic that want to do is actually called my immigration story. So I want to talk about my immigration experience from migrating from Ghana to Canada. So there's a lot of people in Toronto that are immigrants. I'm one of them. My parents are immigrants. So the journey here isn't always easy and it's not always as fun as it seems. All right. So for me personally, being from Ghana, coming from a nice, hot, tropical country, stepping foot in a country where it's like, whoa, it's freezing. I came here in March. So back in the day, the weather in Toronto or Canada was no joke. Absolutely no joke. So again, coming here from a tropical country where we didn't have no snow, like it didn't get as cold as it was here, was more than a shock. A shock. Then the other piece is the food. I had to jump right into the food because you guys know I'm a foodie. The food, y'all, was like a big shock to me because I'm like, I'm so used to eating like my fufu, my banku, my plantain, all these like amazing delicacies that my grandmother would like, whip up, especially jollof. Then you come here and it's like you can't cook fufu like authentically. Like the fufu that we eat here, I would say it's subpar to the fufu back home. So there's just a lot of things that shocked me when I first came to Canada, like shocked me a lot. So another thing that shocked me here was the fact that this is so stupid. When I first came here, I thought all black people spoke Tree. I thought all black people were Ghanaians. So me not knowing any better, like, and also to not speaking English, because I didn't speak a lick of English. All I knew was hello and bye. Like, seriously. So it was really hard for me to comprehend that there's black people, but they're not from Ghana. Like, it was so weird. So I would sometimes, not sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. I would go around talking to people in my language, and the shock of it all was they would turn around and look at me like, girl, you're crazy. What are you talking about? And I used to be like, what? So when I finally did learn English, and I would approach people, well, I would be a bit more conscientious in terms of speaking like my native tongue. I began to ask like, hey, where are you from? And then, people would tell me like, I'm from this country, I'm from that country, or I'm from this country. Like, guys, I was like, what? There's other countries besides Ghana? Like, oh my God. So it was a big culture shock. Culture shock is, I would say, like an understatement for the trauma that I experienced that March 9th, 1993, coming to this country. It was just ridiculous. Like, it's just the atmosphere. There's the cold. I've never seen so much different people. Um, so much different people. Like, I never seen, like, we would see the one, two, like, white person. Yeah, I more saw white people in Ghana, like, in Africa, like, when I was younger. But I've never seen, like, an Asian person or, wait, I should be more specific in my Asian. Like, I meant, like, a Chinese, Vietnamese, or even an Indian or Sri Lankan person. Like, I've never seen people from different parts of the world up until I came to Canada, because I was clearly in a bubble in Ghana. But being younger too, I was like, when I came here, I was 9 years old. So the exposure to different cultures was not really something that we were taught when we were growing up. Going to school back then in Africa, right? In Ghana, I should say. For me personally, I should say. So it was like a big shock. Like, guys, I have to really complain about the food because that's really what I want to rant and rave about. Like, I should just have labeled this my immigration food story, actually. Honestly, y'all, like, There's something about back home food that cannot ever be replicated. Like, no matter how much we try to cook authentic African food abroad here, like it's just not, as the kids would say, giving. It's not. Like, I just I was so used to my grandmother's like food, like her the richness in her food, that like it was just I became homesick just because of the food. Like, I just couldn't handle it because like I've never seen I had to, obviously I got used to use eating like the different cultural foods here, but when I first came, it was just I was dying, like literally, guys. Like I'm so used to Ghanaian food, like, our fufu benku, like, you know a bit here, like I'm just like I was flabbergasted at, like, I was just like, whoa. Like, watching my mom and my dad eat, and then when they brought us to the restaurants, I was like, like, what kind of nonsense is this? You know? So, like, I'm like, they're serving me vegetables. Who wants to eat vegetables when I want nice, authentic, but eventually I got used to it. So that was one of my major struggles, like adjusting to Canada, like as a immigrant. Like, it was very, very difficult. Then as well too, like, making friends was very difficult because I find that the kids back home are a bit more mature. They're mature, they're grown. There's just certain about the way I find back home kids like were raised differently. So over here, it's like getting to know some of the kids and some of the self entitlements that some of these kids had in this country. And I was like, oh yes. Like in Ghana, like, we dare not, especially going to school. Like, that was one of the major ones for me. It was like, oh my gosh, these kids are talking back to the teachers. Like, I was like, and back home, you don't do that. Like, it's not, you have the stick is right on the teacher's desk for you to know that you're not gonna be getting out of hand in terms of your behavior. So we just knew better. We were under manners. I'm not saying like, um over here. I'm not saying like it's the abuse back home is, but at the ending of the day, it really did line us up, unfortunately, in terms of not, we just knew better than to conduct ourselves in a certain light back then. I don't know how it is now. I'm only speaking of my experience from my country back home, which is Ghana. We dare not. Like, I remember not knowing what 2 plus 2 was, and I got my ass bust. So going the next day, I had to make sure like my math was up to par. We there was no tolerance or acceptance for slackness, like just not knowing. You had to come to school with a certain level of decorum and etiquette when you were at school. So for me, being in Western society, going to school here, I was just like, oh my God, look at what these kids could do. I was more than shocked. Shocked, right? And then like you hear some of the way some of the kids talk to their parents. And I was like, I watched some of the black kids even talking to their parents a certain way, and I would be like, oh no, not I dare not. It's just, it was such a culture shock. So assimilating to this culture while trying to like maintain my own culture was very hard. Like going to school, it's like I had to learn the language. It was communicating with the kids was very, very hard. Then I had like the thick accent, so like I was made fun of, like, trust me, and even when some of the kids heard like you're from Africa, the first thing they ask was, oh, do you live with like the jungle? Do you live in the jungle? Do you live with an elephant? I used to look at them like, are you dumb? If I lived with the elephants and them, like, first and foremost, look at me. Do I look like a person that can survive in the jungle? No, you know. So I said, no, like, there's different parts, um, where we all live. But for me personally, I don't have the privilege of being near where, the elephants, the tigers, and those things are. Like, we actually live in homes. That's what I used to say to some of them. I'm like, when I, when my English was up there, when I can speak it and fully understand what they were saying. Because back then, y'all, like, every time somebody would speak English to me, all I would do is just stand there and laugh and giggle. Because I didn't understand a word that they were saying. So it was very traumatizing, like, very, very traumatizing. It's a lot of pressure on a kid. And then, like, Ghana, we have our own way of living as kids. Like, over here, there's so much restrictions in terms of what you can and cannot do. Back home, like, we're free to roam. Obviously, with your parents knowing where you are, you have to be around the community. Obviously, over here, it's like summertime is really when you can really go outside, or spring, or the fall. Winter, oh my God, like, it took me, I'm still not used to the winter here. Like, I came here when I was 9 and I'm 39. So, yeah, it just wasn't something that, even now, like I said, I can't get used to the winter. Like, I don't understand how some people be like, I love the cold. I'll sip to not loving the cold. So, no, it wasn't for me. But it was very challenging, very, very challenging. Like, it was just weird. The friends thing, like, I thank God I met, like, one of my homegirls, Gifty, and Vivian. Like, they were the first two people that I met. And, like, were Ghanaian. So that made me feel comfortable, because I'm like, yay, I have people that I can be friends with, like, around my age, that spoke my language, that, could show me the way of life in Toronto, because I had no clue. No clue at all. And the way that the expectations of how children should be here is completely different from back home. Like, it was an adjustment. I had to get adjusted to having freedom here. But back home, like, there's just certain things that we weren't allowed to do at school. It was just weird. Like, to me, I found over here, I was like, what the hell? Like, no. It was just a bit much. But yeah, it was a lot. Like, so yeah, getting back to what I was saying. So the making friends piece. I thank God I found a few Ghanaian friends, because it was nice being able to connect with people that spoke the same language, ate the same food, understood the adjustment that it took to assimilate to the culture that is Canada, right? And learning the different cultures that is within this country. So Gifty and Vivian, like, really helped me out a lot, because I was just like, okay. Yeah, so it's a lot, really a lot. But I adjusted, and I don't know about the adjustment part, but it's still an adjustment. Like, you don't fully adjust. Like, there's still parts of me that, like, I miss back home. Like, you just learn to cope, I guess, for the most part. Like, my life is here. Don't get me wrong. Like, I can't, if I was to probably go back in my country I would have to have the modern, the modern things that I've become accustomed to. But I'm sure, like, adjusting it's going to be very difficult, because I am used to, I'm not going to sit here and lie and pretend like I'm not used to a certain lifestyle here. I am, So, but going back home would be really nice, because now that I'm older too, like, I can appreciate my country. I can appreciate certain things that I didn't appreciate before growing up here, because you get so enmeshed into this culture that sometimes you begin to lose a sense of yourself, you know. So you have to sometimes go out, come back, do the full circle thing to really appreciate certain things about where you're from, you know, to really to help build on building a grounding and a foundation for yourself, you know, as you get older, you know. But yeah, like being in Canada is not no joke. Like I have to sit down and do an in-depth, maybe like break this video down to like different topics that I can like really talk about. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate to just adjusting. Like we can talk about our immigration stories for hours because there's so much to talk about and so much that we all can relate to, you know. So I'm probably gonna do a part two. No, I'm not probably. I am gonna do a part two where we can maybe just pick like, you know, a few topics and just like have a focal point on that one topic and just discuss the different challenges, the positives, and all of that stuff in terms of immigrating to a different or immigrating or migrating to a different country. All right, y'all. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Comment.